One of the things I always like to do is create a standalone new PCL project for just my view models. So I'm going to go into other.net and I want to specify library. And I'm going to call this better tests.viewModels. And the reason I like doing this is because it then allows me to easily add a new project for unit testing that is just unit testing our view models. And granted, you don't necessarily have to do it this way, but it's just a convention I like to follow. So I'm going to say better tests view models dot tests. And we'll see that Xamarin Studio has generated our first test fixture for us. And if we run our tests, you'll see that one has passed. One of the things that I've done that really speeds up my whole testing process is I've gone into Xamarin Studio's preferences and I've gone into my key bindings. And if you do a search, you can see run tests. And I set mine up to the Control-T or Control-Shift-T to run all my tests. This is a great way to speed up your whole red, green, blue cycle. And if you're not familiar, red, green, blue is kind of where you write a failing test first. Green is you make that failing test pass. And then blue is you refactor or optimize your code. So you setting up key bindings, a really good way to speed that up. And so just to make sure we have everything set up, I'm going to write an assert is true, false. And now when we run our tests, we should get a failing test. Let's go ahead and set up our first test. We're going to create a view model and we're going to call it user authentication view model. And this will be the very first screen of our application. If you're not familiar with view models, I highly suggest you check out some of my other Prax videos where we cover MVVM, which stands for Model View Model. One of the first things I want to do is I want to have a property for email. So I'm going to say prop string email. I'm going to call it email address just so we're very explicit what's going on. And then I want another property. And I want this property to signify whether or not the entered email address is valid. Well, we want it to be a bool. Email is valid. Okay? And so much in the red, green, blue flow, I want to first write a failing test. And to name this test, we're going to follow a given then pattern. Given incorrect email so I can read this, given incorrect email, email valid should be false. You'll notice I can't say new user authentication view model because I need to add a reference to our project. And I'm going to say var VM UT. And I always like to use a UT suffix that signifies this is under test. And I'm going to say new user authentication view model. I'm just going to do a quick build, make sure that works. And then I want to say VMUT email address equals ASDF.ASDF. And I want to say assert is false. And now when we run this, we'll see it's passed. And this is actually not what we want. And that's because by default, email is valid is going to be false. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, I'm going to say private bool email is valid equals true. And then we're going to make this more traditional setter and getter. Now, when we run our application, it should fail. All right. So how do we actually implement this? So I'm going to go into my view models project. I'm going to create a new folder called utils. And I'm going to add a regular expression utility that I've used in our Better Forms series. Copy it over. And then I'm going to go into it. And then I'm going to, obviously I'm not the most original person when it comes up to names. So better test.viewModels.utils. And now I'm going to go into our view model, and what we're going to do is return regex util valid email address is match, and then we're going to get email address. And then we're going to remove our setter. And so now, when we run our tests, it should be green. And then I can continue testing. I want to write a new test. And you really shouldn't do this. You shouldn't copy and paste tests, but I don't want to waste your guys' time. Given correct email, email valid should be true. And let's do is true. And now when we run, we should have 2 tests that are valid. And, you know, I didn't quite do this in the strictest red, green, blue sense, but here again, if I just were to return false, we'll know that that is validating. The test is written correctly. So that's a little bit of a taste of the red, green, blue cycle with TDD.